On the 27th of December 2024, the Chinese have shown the Type 76 light carrier in a public ceremony. So we all had a good look at the ship and we all got questions. And the main one is, what is the ship for? Because it is clearly not the same mission of similarly looking ship, actually, not even close. We all know that the world is changing, and one of the most apparent signs is the Chinese naval development. And most prominent in this context is the development of a carrier fleet. The Chinese are confronting the Western, mostly American military power both asymmetrically and symmetrically. An asymmetrical reply implies responding to a challenge with different technologies, different operational concepts, and different tactics. For example, China is challenging the US carrier fleet with anti-ship ballistic and hypersonic missiles, and this is an asymmetric reply. But China is also expanding and quickly developing its carrier fleet, and this is a symmetric reply. Well, if you're here, you most likely already know the story.
I don't.
Otis, what are you trying to say?
That a quick recap would be useful for the viewers, sir.
Okay. The Chinese development of carrier aviation started in the late 90s when the Chinese purchased the ex-Soviet carrier Varyag from Ukraine. It was just a rotting skeleton that was never completed because of the fall of the Soviet Union. They towed it around the world, reaching China in 2002. And this is a terrific story in itself, and I hope someday someone will make a movie about it.
Directed by Christopher Nolan, sir.
Why Christopher Nolan?
No CGI, sir.
Okay, Otis, we are digressing. This is not a cinema channel, okay? Anyway, the ship was rebuilt with the help of Russian and Ukrainian naval designers, and it was commissioned in 2012 as Liaoning, hull number 16. The embarked component was based on the Shenyang J-15A, a flanker naval variant based on a Su-33 prototype acquired from Ukraine as well. It is a relatively simple ship, a stowbar design with no catapults and a ski jump. With a normal displacement of 54,000 tons, it is also a relatively small carrier to host large fixed-wing aircraft like the J-15. Many observers in the West pointed out how the Liaoning had far inferior capabilities if compared with an American carrier, but that was never the point. The point of the Liaoning was to create a kernel, a central core of trained men, and generate the institutional experience to build a real and effective embarked naval aviation. The Liaoning was joined in 2019 by the Shandong, hull number 17, which is an improved variant of the same design, displacing about 65,000 tons. Despite improvements, the Shandong's purpose was the same: train men and create institutional experience. Both the carrier, in fact, maintained the official designation of test experimental ships for many years, and only recently they have been declared fully operational. The rest is recent history. In June 2022, the Fujian carrier, hull number 18, the first Chinese Katobar design, was launched, and at the moment of writing, it is undergoing sea trials. Displacing 80,000 tons, give or take, with 3 catapults, but a conventional propulsion, it is a beautiful modern ship. The great surprise, though, on the Fujian was the adoption of electromagnetic catapults in what some commentators described as skipping one technology generation. Recently, tire marks have been spotted in the area of the arresting cables, and one of the catapult blast deflectors shows signs of dirt. These are proof that the aircraft launch and recovery tests have started. And the future for the Chinese carrier force is going to be quite busy. We are sure that another carrier, known as Type 004 at the moment, is in the early building stages in Dalian. And this time, we are certain it will be a nuclear propulsion carrier because the tender for the reactors has been published in China. More recently, some hints have emerged that another Type 003 conventional carrier, another Fujian class, could be acquired by the plan in the near future. Some analysts estimate that the Chinese are planning a force of 6 Katobar carriers in commission at any given moment. This is fewer than the USA, but we must consider that the Chinese do not have the global power projection requirement that the Americans have. Therefore, it is quite obvious that the Chinese are enacting a symmetrical response to the American carrier force, which is the American main tool to exert sea control. And all seemed well and good, till we saw the first Type 076, the Sichuan. The Type 76 has been described in many ways as an LPD, an LHD, an LHA, a light carrier, and so on. Honestly, rather than sticking a label on it, let's see what it is, and let's learn a bit more about its features. The ship has a normal displacement around 45,000 tons, a length of 263 meters, and a beam of 43 meters. It is equipped with 2 main elevators and other smaller weapon and personnel elevators on the flight deck. The superstructure configuration is a modern dual-island arrangement, with the front island dedicated to naval tasks and the rear island dedicated to air operations. The propulsion is a modern integrated electric propulsion system with 2 turbines and 6 diesel generators for a total of 78 megawatts installed.
What is an integrated electric propulsion?
It is a type of naval propulsion where diesels and turbines just produce electric power and variable speed electric motors drive the screws. It tends to be about 10-15% lighter and less taxing for the ship's internal layout, while being energetically more efficient than conventional configurations. And by the way, 78 megawatts for a ship this size are not that much. I start suspecting that the Chinese tend to minimize the declared power because it happened the same for the Fujian. For example, consider the Italian Trieste, which is the benchmark of modern light carrier. It has about 34,000 tons of normal displacement. It is 20 meters shorter, albeit it is 4 meters wider, and despite this, it features about 145 megawatts of installed power.
Many of our viewers are Americans, sir. They don't even know that Italy
Otis.
operates aircraft carriers.
Otis, everyone has compared the Type 76 with the America class or the Queen Elizabeth class. Here they get the Trieste, okay? Going back to business, this ship features quite abundant point defenses, 3 Type 1130 Seaways, and 3 launches for HHQ-10 missiles, each featuring 24 missiles. There are the usual big Chinese dispensers for decoys that can launch chaff flares but also active decoys. Obviously, these are all point defenses, and a ship like this needs escorts to operate safely. In terms of sensors, this ship seems to have a rotating AESA radar on top of the forward island and the usual Chinese multifunction mast on the rear island. The ship features a well deck whose length, estimated from the construction photos, is about 90 meters, similar to that of the previous Type 75. Various sources estimate the ground component force at about 1,000 men, but I'm not so sure, and the reason why I will explain in a bit. In fact, before, we need to address the elephant in the room, the electromagnetic catapult! For flip's sake, Alfie, can't you just knock at the door like everyone else?
Hi, Alfie. Thank you for visiting.
Sorry. So, the electromagnetic catapult. At the moment it is covered by a makeshift protection like it was in the Fujian when it was launched, and it is estimated to be about 107 meters in length. The conventional wisdom is that it will be used to launch a naval variant of the GJ-11 Sharp Sword. This is a Chinese UCAV already operational with the Air Force, which is in the process of being adapted for the use on carriers. This is not a loyal wingman in the sense of the US concept, it is a stealth drone with air-to-ground capability. In fact, it features 2 bomb bays whose size could be sufficient for about 1,000 kilos guided weapons each. Albeit it has been seen with small diameter bombs as well. Most estimates place the maximum takeoff weight at 13 to 15 tons, with a payload of a couple of tons. I honestly believe it is lighter than that, but let's stick with it for the moment. As a comparison, the maximum estimated takeoff weight of a J-15 is around 32 to 33 tons. So the GJ-11 is less than a half the takeoff weight of the current Chinese naval aviation mainstay. So why is the catapult more or less of the same length as those on the Fujian? This is not a moot question. Those catapults take up room, particularly they use the precious real estate on the flight deck. A shorter catapult would be welcome, particularly considering that the ship doesn't have an angled flight deck. If it is supposed to launch only drones that weigh less than a half of a J-15, it seems a real waste. But there's another problem. The arresting cables can't be positioned too close to the aft of the deck because they must account for short landings. While I'm recording this, the cables are not installed, but their position seems to be quite clearly identifiable, and they're definitely not at the extreme aft of the ship. This means that a large portion of the deck must be free from obstacles while receiving the aircraft. That is, it's difficult to park other stuff on the flight deck while the landings are ongoing. But you would expect that an automated drone would land more accurately than a human pilot, so you would not need that much safety margin. Would you? Oh my! Is this an indication that piloted aircraft will fly from the Sichuan? Well, some Chinese officials have suggested that this could be the case. But honestly, it's still hard to believe that this ship could be anything more than an emergency stopover for piloted aircraft. With a single catapult, the sortie rate would be very low. With a well deck and the accommodations for the land force, the internals should not be capable of storing large quantities of aircraft fuel and ordnance. The GJ-11 would definitely need less of those. Or maybe there is a big store for aircraft and the embarked land component is way smaller than we think. But the well deck is pretty large anyway, so, well, we just don't know. Moreover, the lack of an angled deck makes the recovery of the aircraft quite dangerous, and this is true for drones too, to be honest. They had the technical possibility of designing an angled deck. I mean, the French Charles de Gaulle is the same size or even a bit smaller, and yet it features an angled deck and 2 catapults. Furthermore, the J-15 is a big aircraft, and I'm not sure you can park any of them on the flight deck and still recover or launch aircraft. The GJ-11 is smaller, and it should not be an issue, but anything bigger seems to tremendously complicate all the operations. At the end of the day, considering that a fair number of helicopters will still be required to support the land force and for anti-submarine operations, I would be surprised if an aircraft carrier this size could operate more 4 or 5 J-15. With the J-35 the situation could improve a bit, but all the other drawbacks still stand. Would such a small carrier wing still worth the effort? Well, I have to tell the truth. I'm not so sure. Sorry, this is the editing guys. I wanted to point out that if you dedicate the whole ship to piloted aircraft with just the bare minimum of helicopters required for search and rescue, then in this case you will probably end up with a decent carrier wing. But even in this case, this would be a rather inefficient aircraft carrier because of the single catapult and the lack of an angled deck. So what is a possible explanation for these apparent design incongruences? I'm sure that the favorite explanation of the usual vocal minority is the Chinese are stupid, what they do is meaningless, they are incompetent and incapable of innovating. If you think so, you are on the wrong video. A simplistic explanation could be that the Chinese saw the Trieste.
They saw the America class. Most likely, sir.
Okay, whatever, they saw Western light carriers, but not having short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft, they just stuck a catapult on it and called it a day. Well, as I said, this is a simplistic explanation. And to be honest, I'm not sure I understand this carrier. I cannot really make sense of the solutions implemented on the Type 076. If it hadn't a well deck, I would understand it more. But I don't. Now, since the Chinese are not stupid, This is telling me that I'm missing something. My speculation, what seems most likely to me, is that this carrier is a semi-experimental unit. I imagine that they are unsure whether this type of configuration could be operationally effective, and so they want to test it in real conditions. They will test it with drones, they will test it with aircraft, they will test it with helicopters, they will test amphibious operations, putting everything together. In general, I imagine that adding some light carriers to a fleet of large supercarriers could make sense for China. The mission could be defending commercial traffic far from the Chinese home waters, or to help the power projection in the South China Sea. I wish I had a good explanation, but I don't. But at least we understood that we have a problem, and we don't fully understand the Chinese, which is better than nothing, I suppose. So, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you very much for having given me your attention. I consider this a honor and a privilege. I want to say a big thank you to all those who are supporting the channel financially on Patreon by being a members, or on GoFundMe, or by any other of the means available. You are absolute stars. I am incredibly grateful. If you can support the channel, which is perfectly fine, do it only if you can. Please interact with the video, leave a comment, hit like, hit the bell, because it's really helping with the algorithm. This is the end of this video, but there's plenty of Chinese stuff to discuss, so please stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.
That was an underwhelming conclusion, sir.
Otis, sometimes being underwhelming is all you can do.
I just used the same expression used by your ex-wife.
See you.